You know, we can assume a lot of things when it comes to, wrestling in general. We can assume that when we hear wrestlers' contracts are coming up real soon, that they're bound to go someplace else, and we would like them to go someplace else. We can assume, hearing through various reports, through very reliable sources, that tonight's NXT, or it's now known as NXT 2.0, is pretty much a disaster. We hear reports of scripts being torn up already a dozen times, a ton, if you will, today, even before the show starts. We hear reports of Kevin Dunn, Mr. Anything You Want, Vince, being backstage to oversee production for tonight. We hear reports of this, we hear reports of that, assuming the worst. And yes, we have a right to assume the worst, based on WWE's track record with Raw, and any track record WWE has gotten basically under the Vince McMahon, Kevin Dunn, Bruce Pritchard regime. But that's all we can do is assume. It's like last night, for example, my mom was happy that the Giants are playoff bound for the first time in a couple of years, that they are basically on the verge of winning the West Division. But even though they're on the verge of doing that, it's not guaranteed. We can assume that just because the Giants made the playoffs, they're going to go all the way and they're going to win. And that'd be great. That'd be tremendous. But we can only assume that's going to happen. We can't say it is going to happen. And that's the one thing with wrestling fans in general. We assume too much. And sometimes those that make these reports where we make those assumptions, sometimes they too are assuming the worst. And again, just like us wrestling fans, they have a right to. But are we jumping the gun? Are we jumping the gun way too early on something that has yet to happen? Because who knows what tonight's NXT will look like? For all we know, yes, Kevin Dunn is there to oversee production, but he doesn't have the final say. We can hear reports of scripts being torn up, a bunch of times already, but who's to say Vince is the one doing it? You see what I'm saying? We can assume the worst, but we don't know what's going on. We don't know what's happening. And all we can do is wait and see what NXT will have to present to us tonight. And if NXT under the new 2.0 era, if you will, is anything like what's been reported as a result, if it is the drizzling you-know-whats, if it is a disaster, then yes, our assumptions were validated, our assumptions were correct. But what happens if it turns out to be the opposite? And it turns out to be something decent, something watchable, something that you can go back and watch maybe a couple of times, or at least certain segments and matches a couple of times, and come on YouTube and say, you know what, I was wrong. Yeah, there was some bad parts, but most of it was good. What if it turns out to be that way? Then we can assume basically that whoever gave out those reports, just like us, basically is bitter, is rebellious towards WWE. And they have a right to be. But then we'll also realize that our assumptions were wrong. And that we're just basing our assumptions on history. Validated history, yes, but history nonetheless. Again, it's like if our favorite team in sports basically, clinches a playoff berth, we're just going to assume right away they're going to be the world champs that year. They're going to win everything. But we could be wrong. Again, assumptions and assuming basically in wrestling, they don't mix well. It's like oil and water. It don't mix well. It don't go together. And we need to start realizing that. My suggestion, if you want to take any kind of advice from a fan of a long term, my suggestion is when you watch something like AEW, shut off the sports entertainment portion of the wrestling side of you, the wrestling brain inside of you, and turn on the wrestling portion of it. And when you watch something like WWE, turn off the wrestling side of that brain and turn on the sports entertainment side, it'll be a lot easier. Because that way, when you watch something like AEW, you're focusing on the wrestling aspect because you've turned off the sports entertainment side of things. And then when you watch WWE, you could focus and enjoy that with whatever they give you because you've turned off the wrestling side of things and you turned on the sports entertainment side. Again, everybody has a right. What I'm trying to say is everybody has a right to feel the way they do, to assume the worst, to feel like they're going to be validated by the reports that's saying this is happening, and it's going to make everything look bad tonight. We could assume that. We could assume that when Johnny Gargano's contract is up, he's going to be Impact or AEW bound. We could assume that Zayn and Owens, when their contracts are up, they're AEW bound. We can assume all that. But we don't know if that's going to be true or not until it happens. Until that moment, that day comes, we don't know if it's true. We don't know if it might change. It's like, again, a team going to the playoffs. They might make the playoffs, but it doesn't mean they're going to go all the way, even though we can assume it's going to work out in their favor. We don't know that. So to me, assuming and wrestling, they don't mix. And we need to find a balance. And that balance, turn off the wrestling side when you're watching WWE, and turn off the sports entertainment side when you're watching the likes of AEW. That's my way of looking at it. But what do you guys think? Comment down below. Love to hear from each and every one of you. Like the video. Check out the Teespring store. Live chat during the premiere. I am out.